We had a collaboration with some Chinese scientists.
Here we have a vaccine. What is the problem? Get over it.
Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
I hope that it can occur in a civil way. And I mean civil in a special way, peaceful.
The biggest question maybe in economics and politics of the coming decade will be what to do with all these useless people.
I just see the need for such a dialogue, and I see the need for action. I see the need for a great reset.
We are 1,097 days into 14 days to flatten the curve. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Johnny Anderson alongside Bruce Adams, and from Cutting Through the Matrix, Melissa. Melissa, we'll start with you. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. If I felt any better, it wouldn't be legal. So, Bruce, how are you today? Got some sleep, I hope, yes?
Did get some sleep. Took a nap yesterday and got a decent amount last night as well. So a little bit more focused today. But yeah, healthy and alive.
That's good. I'm glad to hear it. And I, too, got some sleep. I went to bed extra early last night, and I got 10 hours, if you can believe it. 10 actual hours of sleep. I didn't move. It was one of those nights where you just went and you were just down, and you woke up in the same position you went to sleep in. That's how tired I was. And so, yeah, I finally got some sleep, and I feel a whole lot better today. So moving right into the events of the day. Melissa, you are back with us today. I tell you what, let's start with you. What have you been working on over at Cutting Through the Matrix? Let's talk about that. We'll take our cue from you, and we'll roll right into whatever comes up.
Well, I have just been acclimating to doing everything on my own again. Weston, sadly, a couple of weeks ago, he's transitioned into, well, that's a terrible word.
Yeah, we can't use that anymore. We cannot use that.
No, I know. He is a young fellow, and he's looking for his purpose, because I think what becomes clear when you really dig into this agenda is that we're in the mouth of madness now, and we have to have a purpose from which we can extract some meaning. And he's a really bright fellow. I'm very grateful for the excellent help that he gave me for 15 months. And I had shown him how to upload to the website. And that was when I was doing, well, I actually had just started the midweek clip thing. So it was already 2 uploads a week. But now he set up the little tiny YouTube and BitChute channels. And then I committed to doing a new podcast called Real History with Melissa back in January. And that's going well, but it's a lot of work. And he also taught himself how to make the little videos that go along with the talks. And now I'm teaching myself to do that. And I'm thinking, well, it was a lot when I was doing it by myself back in 2021. And now it's really a lot, but it's good. I've got a purpose, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad that you're continuing with your podcast. It's great to hear those stories. So we were talking in prep about you were doing some research into Ukraine this week, and I thought we could start there because we had an incident that happened a few hours ago of one of our drones unfortunately being shot down. Well, it was, what'd you say, Bruce? It was tapped. It was accidentally tapped by the Russians, and it kind of crashed. Yeah, that's what they're reporting. But anyway, I'm sure that whatever's going on in Ukraine, which we don't even really know, to be fair, whatever's going on in Ukraine, I'm sure that this is now going to be a point for an escalation. To that, let's get into what you were discussing in prep about Ukraine and the political figures that were involved.
Well, because I'm a little bit busier than I had been, I'm finding it difficult to carve out much time during the day for reading. So what I'm trying to do is listen to more news so that I can do that when I'm doing something else. And so what happened last week, as you recall, Russia shot off some hypersonic missiles where there were 6 of them, I think 6 missiles that they released. And I thought, well, I better check in and find out what's happening in Ukraine. And so I listened to a few different newscasts. And the first thing that I was struck by, one of them, I just thought, let's go way out into the Al Jazeera world and listen to what they have to say about what's going on.
Oh, no, goodness. How did you have the stomach to put up with that? That's a mouthpiece for the State Department. My God.
I know. Well, I like to take it from, I like to put myself out there in the traps and see what I can find. But right there, Al Jazeera said it must be true. They compared what was going on in Bakhmut. So you've got the battle for Bakhmut. And I love how, in our lifetimes, everything has got, it has to have a name. It's got to be, so it's the battle for Bakhmut. And they were describing this, they were comparing it to some great battles of the last century. And they said it was like Stalingrad or Verdun. And then they went on to say they are gaining inches and losing thousands. And I think it was that newscast, too, that said that neither side, Ukraine nor Russia, would say how many casualties they were suffering. So, okay, all right, enough of Al Jazeera. And I went and listened to the next state mouthpiece that I could find, BBC. And I hear them saying, this is like Stalingrad or Verdun. And I'm okay. All right. Okay. So they got the handout. They got the flyer.
It's the same memo that went out to everybody.
Yeah. And then, sure enough, that anchor said they are gaining inches and losing thousands. And I thought, okay, it's surreal land. God. And that's all I'm going to get. So finally later on in the day when I had a little time, I went online and sure enough, all the major outlets were comparing it to either Stalingrad or Verdun or both. But anyway, back to the listening that I was doing. Some female news anchor was interviewing a female politician, a Ukrainian MP. And the topic of the conversation was women and women's rights and women's needs. And it was then I realized that it was International Women's Day. So this is a big, the UN trots out everybody and it's women, women, women. And they spent about 5 of the 7 minutes of this segment talking about how women are, now they're participating in the war and their needs need to be met and they're not getting equal pay and they're not services for a woman who is helping with the war effort but needs to have her children and all of the usual talking points. But then they got to the heart of the matter when you think about what wars can be used for, extremely big cultural changes. The minister said, and I've just introduced a bill into, I guess they call it parliament there in Ukraine, I'm not sure, but to legalize same-sex marriages. And I'm like, well, bingo, there you go. That's what it's all about. It's about the biggest possible cultural changes that can be achieved. And of course, it's always presented in the most sympathetic way that, the LGBT community is helping with the war effort. And if one partner is lost on the war lines or injured, and then their partner back at home has no ability to participate in the medical decisions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what it is it's culture war.
I find that interesting because we're told all day, every day by the Russian press. If you can follow any of that, it's very difficult to follow that because they've banned it all here. But we're told by the Russian state media that everything that's happening in Ukraine, they're fighting neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because Zelensky's Jewish. So I'm still waiting to see any of this, quote, neo-Nazi evidence that they're presenting. Okay, maybe you got a couple of ragtag morons out there waving flags around, whatever. But I don't see that agenda that you're discussing. And I fully understand that that's probably what they were saying for sure. But I don't see that agenda playing with a radical neo-Nazi agenda at all whatsoever. Like those people wouldn't even make it to the front lines with someone with a radical ideology like that. That's crazy.
And then, of course, Hillary Clinton was over there talking to Zelensky's wife, Madam Zelensky, and it was, women, LGBTQ, rah, rah, rah. No, what we're presented, no matter which state propaganda you look at, is just a farce. It's a show.
The whole thing is a show. Everything on both sides, and I'm not praising one side or the other here, but there's propaganda on both sides. There was propaganda as a pretext to lead into it to begin with, and to be honest with you, when somebody brings up the issue of Ukraine with me, I don't even know what to say. I don't, because apart from, and Bruce and I were discussing this privately last week, I think it was, and he says, what do you think's actually going on over there? And I said, hell if I know. I don't know. Apart from actually going there, and I'm not in any hurry to get in a car and drive over there, I assure you, because I could. But apart from actually going there, I don't really know what's going on in there. I don't trust our side. I don't trust the Russian side. I don't trust the Ukrainian side. So there's no, and we've said this time and again, there's no good guy in this fight. When you've got Zelensky out there inviting BlackRock, Vanguard, JP Morgan, and Wells Fargo to rebuild the country, something's wrong. Something's really wrong. And you have volunteers, right? I'll just put, they call themselves something else, and I don't really know, but I can't remember. But they're medical personnel that are from different European countries. So like you've got medics from the UK, you've got medics from Germany, Poland, the Netherlands, France, and Italy. All these European countries, and they will actually volunteer their time. They'll run charities here. And when they're not working their regular jobs here for the medical services, driving ambulances or being medics or EMTs or whatever here, then they will take their personal time and they will go to Ukraine and they will provide medical aid to both sides. They don't care. They're just there to treat people. So apart from getting a firsthand account from someone like that who's completely impartial and just trying to save human life, I don't know if you can actually get a legitimate claim from somebody, like a legitimate story as to what's really going on in there.
No, and if you think about it, like one of the headlines that I saw was from the Daily Mail as they were talking about what's going on in Bakhmut is a return to the bloody World War I trench warfare. Now, if you think about drones and hypersonic missiles, and all you have to do is go to the State Department, and I'm sure that this is just like this is what they're prepared to tell the public in terms of the arms that they're sending over and the money that they're sending over. I'm sure that it's much more, or maybe they're not getting any weaponry. We don't know, maybe it's just the money exchanging hands. I mean, that's a kind of a far out assertion, but we don't know anything. We can be lied to all day long. But if you look at the list of what the State Department says that they're sending over, this is high-tech advanced weaponry. What are they doing engaged in trench warfare? Why are they telling us in this day and age, when people sit in a room and operate drones, that they're gaining inches and losing thousands? It does not add up.
The only way that I could see that might add up would be if this was conventional warfare from, say, like the Cold War era, where none of that stuff that you're talking about existed. So if you think about the moment in the year where we are for that part of the world, you have the process of it's a thaw because like it's too warm. We didn't get the deep freeze this year. You do have a little bit of freezing that's gone on in Eastern Europe, but nowhere near the level they need in order to operate tanks and artillery effectively across the countryside over there, because they don't have a lot of paved roads like they do here in the West. And so the only way that I could see where they would be gaining inches instead of whatever and losing thousands would be being stuck in the mud, like they like happened in the Second World War.
That is what they're saying is going on. That it's bloody, it's muddy, it's World War I and II trench warfare. I just can't wrap my head around that with all of the weaponry that we're supposedly sending them. How
we're not
can
sending
that
modern
be?
stuff. We're not sending modern stuff. The stuff that we're sending, and we've been watching a lot of it, the stuff that we're sending is it's Cold War era stuff. That's what we're sending, because that's what they're running into on the Russian side of things. Is they're still using a lot of their Cold War artillery and tanks and things like that, and their personnel carriers. All of that's Cold War era stuff, and all of that is declassified anyway. They already know what that stuff is. And so we're sending all of that. Now, all of our current stuff, like our up-to-date M1 A2 Abrams and the our artilleries and all of our MRAPs and stuff, all of that is going to Poland. But that's a little bit different story because Poland's a NATO country. So they're staging all of that in Poland. But as far as everything else, we're stripping it down and sending it to Ukraine, yeah.
But it does, I mean, it is going somewhere. Otherwise, how are we hearing stories about drones? You know, I mean, in other words, wherever it's being staged from, it's getting there, right?
So some of the drones are actually civilian drones, and they're just strapping like a mortar to it or a hand grenade or something like that and dropping it from height and hitting, or they're just using it for targeting. And they'll use it to call in artillery, or they'll use it to call in mortars, and they can see where the rounds are hitting and then adjust. There's a lot of drone usage for that, and a lot of videos out there that they're doing that. There is one piece of kit that we did supposedly send them that is 13 years old, and that's the HIMARS. That's a medium range missile system. I think the range on it is something like up to 200 miles, I think, or something like that. It's pretty long range, relatively speaking. But we sent that over, and supposedly we sent it, but they're not using it unless we give them data, the intel to use it, supposedly. So I don't know. I honestly don't know for sure. The kind of hardware we're sending them, we have what the government's telling us, and then when we watch videos and stuff, we rarely see any of the hardware that we gave them, except for maybe like the javelins that we sent over or some of those things. But we rarely see anything like HIMAR or any of the other vehicles. We see, T-72s, or we see AKs, or we might see the body armor that looks like ours, but that's all you really see.
What about the missiles that Putin deployed or the Russians deployed last week? Were those Cold War era? I mean, it made it sound like, see, I'm just listening to you guys talk, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. This is what it's like talking with fellows, the men, It's like, I was a player of dolls and Barbies and stuff like that. It's like, oh, big guns. But, I mean, are the Russians, those missiles were not Cold War era, were they?
Yes and no. So they're updated Cold War. So they have better targeting, but they're effectively Cold War era. Yeah. They're claiming that they use thermobaric, which is think of like a vacuum bomb or something like that. That's supposedly stuff they've been using, but we've not actually seen solid evidence that, yes, they are using that. So as far as we know, it's just normal conventional stuff from Cold War.
We did see one. We did see a video of one where you saw the impact, you saw it go out, and then all of a sudden you saw it get sucked back in a secondary explosion, and it blew everything out. Think of it as a miniature nuclear weapon. That's basically what it is.
Or a fuel air bomb. We would, yeah.
That's more.
And that's called what?
It's called a thermobaric weapon. And they've been supposedly using these in and around areas of Ukraine and things. And I don't see this turning into everybody knows this is where it goes. I don't see this turning into a nuclear conflict, at least not in the near term. I don't see that, because I think that's talk, but I get the feeling like this entire thing with Ukraine is like it's like a cat toying with a mouse, if that makes any sense. I feel as though, and don't get me wrong, I legitimately think that people and innocent people are being killed in there on both sides. I do believe that. But I feel as though the level that our, quote, leaders on both sides are playing, I feel like this is all for show. I feel like this is all for, I don't know, like it's almost like we're meant to see these things. We're meant to have these talking points thrown at us. All of this seems like it's theater.
Well, it's like a couple of weeks ago I mentioned Wag the Dog, the movie Wag the Dog, which it's really, must see about just making up an event. But the point that I was going to get to a few minutes ago is trench warfare. You see, whatever is happening and wherever the money's going and wherever the newer artillery is being staged from, when the powers that be want to stage something or have something happen, they have no qualms about wars of attrition, just thousands and thousands and thousands of the little guy day after day after day after day going into the trenches and getting blown away. No qualms. And even if all it is theater, they don't mind the live show for ends that we don't really see from this vantage point.
Yeah, I was going to point out that the Russians haven't pulled out any of their high-tech stuff, like the Angara tank that they supposedly have. And some of the other vehicles we know they haven't pulled out. So their high-tech, high-end stuff and the good soldiers, they haven't been pulled out yet. It's only been conscripts and Cold War era weapons. So I think it's theater.
Okay, there is something I'd like to say on that. I think we discussed it. I can't remember if we did it on a broadcast or not. I think we discussed it with Marty last week when I said that the reason that they don't have the T-14s, the Armadas, the reason they don't have those is because their defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, stole all the money. There was supposed to be $30 billion set aside for that, and he stole all the money. Supposedly, I mean, this is what I heard from a guy who's an expert on the former Soviet Union. Supposedly, that was the reason that they don't have a fully operational Armada program. Which, by the way, they don't share with the Chinese, even though they're military. They have a military alliance. They don't share that technology with anybody. As far as their A team, as in, I'm assuming that you're speaking on like Russian Spetsnaz at that point. I did hear that they lost somewhere around 1,000 of them when they were trying to take, was it Soldar? Was that the name of it? Soldar? Or whatever it was.
Sounds familiar, something like that.
They lost around 1,000 of them when they were making an attempt to take that territory. But that wasn't really reported. Now, again, I had heard that from somebody who's an expert on the former Soviet Union that still speaks to people within the Russian government. And that was a humiliation that the Russian government, and most notably Vladimir Putin, would not mention that publicly. And more to the point, even if you're to somehow kind of go in and broker a peace deal, which now they're saying, oh, well, Xi Jinping, he's going to go in and he's going to broker the peace deal. Yeah, right. China talking a peace deal? Seriously? They're talking about invading Taiwan. You're supposed to listen to that? Like that's supposed to be something legitimate? The world's supposed to follow that? I don't think so. Then Trump comes out a couple of days ago at some event that he held, and he says, look, I can broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, and I can have it done in 24 hours. I don't even think that that's doable. And the reason I say that is because even if this is something that's a legitimate thing, and again, I believe that people are really dying in there, it's too much of a humiliation for the Russians to just stop at this point. I mean, you're too far into this. You're too deep into this. You've lost too many people. And so you're gonna stop this and be humiliated? I think it's too much of a humiliation for them to stop.
I don't know the script on this one. I don't know if the role that Putin is assigned calls for him to be humiliated. It is scripted, but I don't think, because I've heard several of the things I've read or listened to talk about, will there be peace negotiated this year? Or positing the idea that perhaps there can be peace negotiations in the fall. What's wrong with summertime? I don't know, but autumn has been put out by a few sources as when they might arrive at a peace negotiation. But what would be the reason for negotiating peace? If we're watching theater and the theater has multiple purposes, multiple stories at play, and we know that they never concern themselves with real victims, with real fallout, then what's the motivation for negotiating peace at this time? I don't see it, because there's way too much money that is changing hands. And then there are all of the social changes that will be implemented in these countries that, starting with Ukraine, but the countries that surround it will be affected by this, and Russia will be affected by this. I mean, we were talking off air about some of the things that go on in Russia that don't really get properly reported in the Western media in terms of sex trade, sex trafficking, pedophilia, that kind of thing. But the social changes take some time to become institutionalized, and that has to happen. That's got to be one of the reasons why we're there in the first place.
That also, and to kind of just add to that point that you made there, that also goes for their abortion numbers as well. They actually have a higher abortion rate per capita than the U.S. or any Western country does, for that matter. Along with China, I might add, China's not immune from any of this. They're all involved in the same thing. We just don't hear about it.
I was just going to talk about, the way in which China's abortion situation, the one child becoming the two child, I mean, all of these make us think in the West that the abortion situation has somehow improved or changed, but it's huge business there. It
is. No, it most certainly is. You talked about a whole bunch of money changing hands. Let's get into the banking system. I'm sure that you've been paying attention to that, so let's discuss that a little bit. Are you surprised? Because I'm most certainly not. We were expecting this for quite some time, and I'm sure you were too.
What bank failure?
What bank failure? Yeah, that's right. What is there a bank failure that's going on? Is there a banking problem? I don't know. Oh,
it was very funny because I was writing on Sunday and I was going to post it on Sunday, and I kept debating whether what I was going to post was going to be called "Too Big to Fail" or "Not Too Big to Fail." And I'm like, well, you're not Shakespeare, too big or not too big. And I ultimately went with not too big because I thought it is quite possible that for whatever reason, and what I was thinking of was bail-ins, that all of the things that got put into law after the 2008 crash, one of the biggest ones that we have not yet seen play out in a huge, huge way are the bail-ins. And basically, that is what is going to affect small people, average people, people that don't have $250,000 in a bank account. I don't know anybody that has that kind of money. Do you? So the bail-ins are basically when an institution is failing and the government says, well, we can't bail them out because that would be contagious. That would spread. And, so they say, well, let's implement this new thing, the bail-in strategy. So I ultimately called my tiny little piece "Not Too Big to Fail," and I was wrong. They bailed them out. We're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of this. What is there contagion? What will it look like? But this is the beginning of something I think very big, because we know that they've got the central bank digital currencies that they want to roll out in a big way. And they, the world, that was the big talking thing at the World Economic Forum. And what does digital currency look like? How do we bring it about? And I think that this is the beginning of a new system.
I think it's the first step, as in I said yesterday, they're shaking the tree. That's all they're doing. This isn't the big one, I don't think, yet. And Bruce made the point yesterday that they don't have the infrastructure ready yet. It's a system that they're constantly working on, but we don't think that they have it ready to roll out yet. I think if they roll it out now, right now it's too soon. This year, probably. Maybe towards the end of the year, I don't know. But this year, I think we'll start to see it. And I surmised yesterday, and you can comment on this if you like, I surmised yesterday that it needs to be a crisis big enough to where they have to hold everybody hostage, not just a few, not some startups.
Right.
Not some media people, not a couple of biotech companies that invested with just this over here. Just or Charles Schwab, which you mentioned in, not to be confused with dear old Klaus, mind you. But you mentioned Charles Schwab in the beginning in prep, and that's not enough. Even though they hold $7 trillion in global assets, they need something to be able to hold everybody hostage. They need everybody's pensions. They need everybody's mortgages. They need everybody's savings accounts. That's what they have to do. They have to hold everybody hostage. Then they have to come out and say, well, look, we've got this big of a problem and you're going to lose everything unless we do this. This is the only thing that's going to save it. And they'll give you a portion of it in a digital currency, but that'll come with stipulations, which they'll implement later. That's what I'm guessing anyway.
Yeah, I obviously this one failure, even with that smaller, what was that, Silvergate Bank was a crypto bank that also collapsed last week. And I heard that there were a lot of
I heard about Circle. Circle was invested in Silicon Valley. It had about $3.5 billion.
Yeah, Circle and Etsy, I think, and there's
Etsy
some
in
fallout
there too?
from.
Wow.
Yeah, Etsy's a big one because evidently small people that had little businesses, like the mom that crochets something or whatever and is selling it there. Well, all of those people had delays by days of getting paid. So those were those ramifications. I think it was Circle, Etsy, Roku.
Roku, yes, I heard about Roku. Yeah.
Yeah. And another big year too. I don't know that we're affected by this. And then Schwab and whatever that fallout is. But before that, a couple of days earlier, maybe Tuesday of last week, Silvergate Bank, which is a cryptocurrency bank. They deal in real money, but a lot of crypto changes through there. They failed. Now that's a very different thing. They aren't going to get bailed out. It's a different kettle of fish. But I also heard from somebody that I was talking to yesterday, and I have not verified it, and I probably wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't know where to start, but that there were multiple bank runs last week on different institutions. And I don't know what you two are hearing, but
if you look at the stocks and everything of the various banks that they went down. Many of the banks went down like 30%, 20%, 15%. There was a small run on the banks, a little bit. Silvergate was March 8th, by the way. I did find an article talking about that. That was the first bank of this to close down since 2020. So
okay. So, I think they'll just keep hammering at us from a variety of ways. And it may not be one big thing like the mortgage debacle of 2008 and all of that fallout, but I think we'll get it from several different angles. And they have a convenient person as if Joe Biden, he's sitting there making policy, right? But they can point to his strategy of raising interest rates and say that is what is behind all of this. But, it's a corrupt system run by gangsters, and increasing the interest rates to somehow fight inflation when it's all a big shell game. It's smoke and mirrors, and we're not supposed to see what is really going on, did you hear that all of these SVB employees got their bonuses?
I did not hear that. No.
Yes. That's like huge.
Wow.
And not surprising at all. First of all, I just learned today when I circled back to read a little bit more, but the CEO himself, he cashed in some millions, I don't know, $3.5 million worth of stocks 2 weeks before all of this happened.
That I did hear, yes.
Yeah. So I just learned that today, but last week when I was looking around to see, but where's the juicy stuff? And the juicy stuff was that literally hours before the insurers came in to take possession of the bank, all of the employees received their bonuses for 2022.
Of course,
and it said there is nothing to see here, folks. This is not unusual because it has been our tradition to pay the annual bonuses on the second Friday of March every year. We're not doing anything that we don't always do. Friday the 13th, lucky for some.
Yeah, not so lucky for all the depositors and all the creditors that are not going to get paid. But no, does anybody else getting that in 2008 vibe from this? Because I am. I'm certainly getting that because everybody, like all the banking heads, all the executives and everything, they all got their bonuses. Everybody else got screwed in 2008. Yeah. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I just like to point out before we go any further, because this just came across my desk. On this day, the day of recording, so March 14th, 1883, very significant day in history, Karl Marx, the founder and creator of communism, made his most useful contribution to mankind. He died. I'd just like to point that out. Anyway, continue.
Well, what I was going to say, the late Alan Watt of Cutting Through the Matrix websites and all of his great research, one of the things that he reminded people over and over after 2008 crash is that they themselves, the bankers and the organizations, the IMF, the World Bank, all of the central banks said there will be a part 2 to this crash. We don't know when, but there will be a part 2 because the underpinning structure, hasn't changed.
That's true.
And the only thing that they put in of any kind of significance that might change it, and of course that would be to make it worse for us, is what I just mentioned with the bail-ins. So yeah, I smell a 2008 for sure.
Oh yeah, I smell a 2008 coupled with a 1929 and a sprinkling of whatever it was before that led us into the Civil War. So I feel as though that's, it's a culmination of everything. And then of course you can throw Weimar Germany on top of that too, because that's where we are, at least culturally. And as far as inflation, we should technically be there. But before we go any further, Bruce, I would like for you to explain what you were explaining to us in prep as to how this happened to begin with and what the Chinese have to do with this.
Okay, so basically, the SVB Bank had some really bad loans. They made basically their startup loans, their tech company loans, those kind of things, and they loaned it. I'm trying to remember exactly how it was. They loaned it, and then they used the loan as collateral as well. So it didn't make any sense.
Which you can't do.
You can't do that. So the investment ended up being, so basically what happened is they put the money back into the bank after they got the loan, and then they invested it, but it was under the name of the bank now. And then when the Fed increased the rates, they basically defaulted on the loans. The people that took out the loans, they defaulted, and then the bank was like, well, we're out of all this money now, and they decided we're going to sell bonds. Well, the bonds they had were at 2%, and they're currently at 5% or 6% right now, and they can't get the full price. So if you spent, 10 billion on it, you're only getting 75 cents on the dollar to 80 cents on the dollar now, because those bonds are basically worthless, because the new bonds are more yield. So basically they lost, I think they were short like 20 or 30 billion dollars or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they had a big fire sale basically, and that's when you started seeing a run on the bank, and investors started bailing, and that's when they shut everything down with them. And but not to worry, what is it? FDIC? Are they the ones that guarantee the 250,000?
Yes.
They said that they're going to guarantee all investors, including the ones over the 250,000 mark. So that's the bailout that we're talking about.
With what money?
They're going to print it.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Which is going to raise inflation, which is going to put the burden on us, the average person.
Yeah.
So we bailed them out, basically. And China, to your point about how China's involved, some of their biotech companies are some of the ones that took out loans from SVB Bank.
Interesting.
Is it just me, or does this whole thing just reek of a money laundering operation? That's all this is. That's literally all this is. I was reading a little bit of a book today, and I'd like to read this on how an individual gets so wrapped up in money laundering and what they can do. This is a true story. This is about a guy named Michel Zidona. He's an Italian guy. Now listen to this, okay? He started this back in 1959. He ran a lucrative business selling stolen goods off of a truck to American forces that were stationed in Italy at the time at the end of the Second World War. Now listen to what this guy was able to do. So he operated that truck in 1959. He then acquired, with all of his proceeds and everything, a small bank called Banca Privata Finanziaria, right, which is private bank of finance in Italian. And he went on to acquire a steel foundry, which was later sold to the American Crucible Company, which established a Liechtenstein holding company, Fosco AG, through which he had obtained a controlling share in Finab Bank in Geneva, Switzerland. This is ridiculous. He founded a foreign exchange brokerage, MoneyRex, which established close relations with the Vatican's Institute for Religious Works. He became a legal advisor to Sinovosco, which is a textile manufacturer. Right now, all this because he started a stolen goods business, selling stuff out of the back of a truck. right? He then became the president of Mediterranean Holidays and Philips Carbon Black Italiana. He was the managing director of Chesborough Ponds, a member of the board of Remington Rand Italiana. And after he had raised $2.4 million from the Milanese business circles for Archbishop Montini to finance the Old People's Home, right? The charitable front, right? You got to have those. You got to have your charitable front there. Pope John Paul, who formally authorized him to become the Vatican's chief money manager.
This is
ridiculous. This is ridiculous. He then began selling the Vatican's controlling interest worth $350 million in Società Generate Immobiliare, which then moved $40 million to a Luxembourg bank, Paribas Transcontinental. While Institute for Religious Works took a large block of the shares in Sedona's Fina Bank, which was his own bank that he started in the beginning. After divesting the Vatican of its holdings in Italian companies like Condante d'Acqua in 1969, Pantella in 1970, and Serrano, a maker of contraceptive pills, there's that. In 1970, the Vatican involved in contraception business? Never would have guessed that. Never would have guessed it. In 1970, no less. The Vatican funds were then dispersed all over the place, and Sedona himself became the president of 7 Italian companies, the vice president of 3 banks, and a major shareholder in the Vatican-linked Banca Union, having forged links with Hambros, 25% controlling stake, and Continental Bank of Illinois, a 15% stake. Sedona found himself in close touch with the U.S. Treasury Department. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? He was the bank's chairman at the time, David Kennedy. Another Kennedy, who became the U.S. Treasury Secretary under President Nixon. Mr. Kennedy later became a board member of Fosco AG. Who would have thought that? He left the Treasury Department to become a board member for his bank there. After transferring to the United States, Sedona bought a controlling stake in the Franklin National Bank. Then this is when it all started to go downhill. The downfall began to develop when he started investing in U.S. interests, and then the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission stopped all trading on something called Vetco Offshore Trading Industries after a Los Angeles investor was found to have acquired 25% of Vetco's outstanding shares in a violation of SEC regulations. It transpired that 20% of Vetco's shares had options that had been acquired on behalf of IRW through a Liechtenstein-based fiduciary industry or investment services, which had an office in Sedona's Rome office complex where the Vatican was. After the Vatican had been obligated to pay a fine of $320,000 by the Securities and Exchange Commission after having acquired 454,000 Vetco shares as part of 714,000 Vetco shares sold by the FIS, the largest block of shares ever traded to date on the American Stock Exchange. Sedona's sustained foreign exchange loss was at $48 million in 1973 and a further $150 million in 1974. It was then discovered that Franklin National Bank had a minimum of $43 million in hidden phony profits in foreign exchange deals with Sedona-controlled Swiss banks. Doesn't it sound like they're doing the same thing all over again?
Oh, it's even worse than that. The Fed is hiding all the Fed is literally hiding all of the, not just the money they're losing, but also the money that's being laundered. And, as you're talking, they're hiding all of that. We don't know the full extent of what's going on and how bad it really is.
Do you remember back in 2008 when the U.S. Fed, I think they just picked a number. They said they needed to pick a really big number. It was like 700 billion
800
for the okay. Yeah. And then when they had to be accountable for it, it went to money heaven. Do you remember that?
I do. And the man who oversaw that was a man by the name of Neil Kashkari, who happens to be I remember him, the $800 billion man.
As Alan Watt liked to pronounce it, Cash Carry.
Yeah, that's him. That's him. Yeah. He was also a big proponent of lockdowns during COVID, I might add.
Really, that's interesting.
Yeah, he's working for the Fed now, He's back as a Fed chairman now of one of their branches. He was working as the executive VP of PIMCO, the bond company. And then he, at least that was, that's where I saw him a few years ago. And then I saw him, or excuse me, more than a few years ago. And then now I see him, he's running, he's an executive vice president of the Fed now, or vice chairman of the Fed or whatever, which one of their branches, I'm not sure which.
Well, when you were reading all of that, you know that term failing upwards?
Yeah.
To FUP, when you fail upwards? Well, it made me think we need a new term, SUP. That's when you steal upwards.
That's what they do. They steal all the way to the top. You
steal a little bit and you just go all the way to the top. Yep.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to sit here and watch all this. And it's like, we don't have a crystal ball. We know what they're going to do. Why? Because they've done it before. I mean, all of that, what I just read, all of that's an account from, it started in 1959, and this is just one incident from one guy. That's how much damage one guy can do when you have unchecked, well, I can't even, unchecked and uninterested agencies. I'll just put it that way, because anybody that gets near any of this stuff to try and give it some kind of oversight, if they try to, they get pushed out of the way every single time. They get pushed out of the way. Anytime somebody tries to go after one of these agencies, it never goes anywhere. They say, oh, well, we're going to hold that group accountable. We're going to go after that person. And they'll throw somebody to the wolves, some low-level person. Do you know how many people went to jail over the 2008 fiasco? Do you know how many? One guy.
One
guy. One guy went to jail for that. The biggest heist in U.S. history. And one guy went to jail for that? They pinned it on one guy? So my point is that these institutions, these government oversights, you're never going to get any accountability out of these people, because they put people in charge of these committees or these investigative whatever, and it's all just for show. It's for you to think, oh, well, they're doing something about that. They're going to go after that, and you're going to see some results out of that. No, they put people in those positions that don't even understand what they're supposed to look into.
Right. And I think that there is a hiring practice, whether it's these kind of bureaucrats or, intelligence agencies. They simply know. If they don't know it intuitively, they get the memo and they snap to really quickly. They just know who butters their bread, and they're not going to step on those toes. It's not going to happen. And you may have the one guy that goes to jail, but most of the time we don't even get that much. We just have oversight committees and investigative committees, and we're looking into this, and years later, and people forget, we suffer from with short-term memories, and we don't remember. Oh yeah, that's right, they screwed us over a few years ago. Wonder whatever happened there. Well, the same people are screwing you over again. That's true.
All right, we've got about 10 minutes left. What else would you like to talk about? You got any other pressing issues you want to get into?
Oh, no, I don't. I'll leave it to you two to come up with something. Like I said, I have not been able to follow things as meticulously as I would like to. I'm having a hard time deciding what's important for me to know and what's not.
I understand. I've been buried in some books the last couple of weeks myself, and it's been quite eye-opening. And the discussions behind the scenes around here have been very interesting, to say the least, the last couple of weeks. And we're still trying to figure out how to. Well, we're still trying to figure out how to wrap our heads around it. And I don't want to say too much on the matter yet, because I need to be more informed on the matter. We got a lot of work to do first before we go down that road, because if what we found that we can actually, as in, like, we can prove, if we can get the paper trail and we can tell people exactly how we found it, how we came to that conclusion, and where they can go to come up with that same solution, then that's what we have to do. But we can't talk on it yet until we brief ourselves on it fully. And if this is indeed the case, then this changes everything. So this changes literally everything. Now, that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that what we're dealing with here in the West is any different. It just means that the problem goes a whole hell of a lot deeper than what we thought. So there is that. So we're going to have to go that route first before we go any further with it. I can tell you a little bit about it behind the scenes, but I can't talk about it publicly yet, because we need to get further into it. But I'm happy to share what we have found thus far with you, because you're a very well-read, well-researched person. So maybe you've run across this stuff before. But
it's interesting. I'm definitely intrigued.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it offline. But like I said, we still need a little bit more time before we can get into it. Big tech. We can go to the big tech route. Some of the small tech companies were kind of caught up into this banking collapse, this Silicon Valley, obviously Silicon Valley Bank. So some of the tech companies were actually caught up into that. But Facebook, if this is any indication, because I tend to think, at least looking at trends and stuff, I tend to think that whatever the tech companies do, that usually serves as a bellwether as to what's going to happen throughout the rest of the economy, because those are the industry leaders, so-called. And I think Facebook made a mistake with the whole the Metaverse thing, this VR thing, and they're promoting it down at the World Economic Forum, and you got Klaus Schwab standing out there talking about, I had my little avatar in the Metaverse, and it was great and it was cute. Well, they just shut it down. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to meet the virtual Klaus Schwab in the Metaverse, which I wouldn't even go in there anyway. But I thought at that time that the Metaverse idea, just the concept of it, right, before they even got into the whole, this big clunky thing you wear on your head and all that stuff, I thought that was a failing concept to start with. I thought nobody's going to take to that. Yeah, you're going to have some people take to it, sure, but that's a niche thing. It's not something that people are going to be attracted to. And sure enough, here it is. They officially shut that down. That's done. The Metaverse is done. So they're going to now change things. Zuckerberg says that they're working on a text-based something powered by an AI system or something like that. I'm not quite sure what that is. Maybe that's something they're going to take their WhatsApp platform and they're going to transform it a little bit. I don't know. Possibly they'll do something like maybe what Telegram has done. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing here because that's kind of what they do. But Zuckerberg and Facebook, or Meta, whatever it is, I'm assuming they're going to change their parent company name now because they're not doing that anymore. They're going to fire another 10,000 people. That brings their number to almost 25,000 that they fired in the last 6 months. And that is, they've lost 70-something% of their value in the last 24 months. So I'm assuming that is a sign that they are either going to be swept out with the tide, or they're going to try and make an attempt to restructure and retool. What do you think?
Well, I think it would probably be more along the lines of restructure and retool. And it doesn't really matter if they're swept out, because there's going to be some other version that serves its purpose when the time, like I was talking to somebody a couple of months ago about Facebook, and they said, oh, well, only old people use Facebook. And I said, oh, really? I didn't know that. And they said, yeah, new people are into WhatsApp and they tweet and they Instagram and stuff. But Facebook is the world, the universe of older people. I'm like, well, that's interesting. That's good to know. But see, I think that the metaverse is bigger than Zuckerberg's company. It's bigger than putting on these VR helmets or special glasses or something like that. When I want to be careful with language, but when I think about the metaverse, I think about a system that we're actually already in a lot of different ways, which is an augmented, hyper-realistic, internet-based, Internet of Things world in which we interact with other people in ways that aren't based in a non-digital reality. And one of the things that I saw the other day came in, I think it was from MIT, their technology news that I looked at, and it said, hyper-realistic beauty filters are here to stay.
Yeah.
Now, I'll show you an example.
Yeah. I'll show you an example here in a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't do the social media. I only read about it and try to keep up on things in that way. But these are filters. So you don't have an avatar that's like a cartoon or a sexy babe or something like that. These filters, with their exaggerated eyebrows or eyelashes and everything, they move in real time with your facial movements. That's how good the AI is on them. And I think, to me, the metaverse it's a state of mind that is being created in people where they can no longer separate fact from fiction because they're so digitally plugged in. So the players in the game, the Zuckerbergs or the, if Musk's or whoever is behind whatever company, they'll come and they'll go and the names will come and go. But this 5G, soon to be 6G, complete cage that is designed for us, that is here to stay. And people no longer being able to discern what is real and what is digitally manipulated, that is here to stay as well.
To give you an idea, this is a young lady who's demonstrating one of these filters, if you will. And we've been talking, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. But this is crazy how far these things have come. And this is her with that filter on.
Okay.
It looks, it looks real. You can't tell really anything in there. You can't tell that that's a filter or any of that. And then that's with it off.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like the same person.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So what you're demonstrating is a rather plain featured woman who's turned into a fashion model with an artificial intelligence beauty filter. That's what I see.
real time. In real time.
Yeah.
This is not like something that you do with like Photoshop and hours worth of editing or anything like that. This is in real time. And Bruce has been very outspoken on these things since we've started to see them, and we've been we've been kind of shocked about them. Go ahead, Bruce. Go ahead and jump in there, because you're nodding and smiling like, yeah, I'm ready to just criticize this all the way around. And I don't disagree with you.
I don't even have to criticize it, because it's these women that are criticizing it. They're saying this is fantastic, but at the same time, this is going to be devastating to society as a whole. They're like, yeah, this is nice, but this is going to destroy women's self-confidence. This is going to push the market in the future for cosmetic surgeries and those kind of things. The gene altering stuff that they're talking about doing for cosmetics, it's going to just push that market, because you're going to have this filter and be perfect, but then in your real life you're not going to be, and so you're going to have self-esteem issues. You're going to have, that's a bunch of BS in and of itself. But anyway, that whole logic behind the whole self-esteem and all of that has been twisted and manipulated. It's completely broken. But this filter stuff, the stuff before this, the avatars and stuff like in the metaverse and all of that, that is really easy to distinguish between real and fake. I mean, that is like a cartoony fake world, that's easy. This stuff, when you start getting into this, you can't tell. I don't, you looking at that, the tells that you see with fake videos, you can't see in that filter. They're not there. So it's really tough. It's going to be tough in the near future.
Now, who
when you think about
these? Curious, who develops these? Is it? I can only assume that our TikTok. Obviously, they're using this, and that was a TikTok video that we were looking at. TikTok has deployed these. I'm assuming that this is tech companies that have worked with China to develop this, and they're using it specifically in Western countries. I'm assuming that this is a campaign of demoralization. That's my guess. I could be wrong, but I'm happy to hear any rebuttals to that.
I have not looked into who's developing it. I don't know. To me, if I'm just going to pull it out of the air, I would say I don't know that you can blame it on one country. I mean, one country and demoralization is a good idea. It's a good guess, but I think that ultimately we're going in this direction where we're not supposed to be able to know what is real any longer. And we're supposed to prefer. See, when I saw that woman go from her real face into the beauty filter face, it made me think of the movie. I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, but Surrogates, where they had the bots that went out on the street and did their business. And it did exactly that. Nobody wanted to leave the house because they were just them. They looked like them. Or they could send their gorgeous robot out to do business on their behalf. And it also makes me think, quite frankly, heaven forbid that girls and young women develop their minds. Wow.
Yeah.
Here we live in this world and we get it all the time. We get it in the music industry and the film industry, is that you're going to live forever, or you should look like, a babe, a breeding age babe when you're 70, and it's ludicrous. to everything, turn, there is a season. And if you haven't developed your mind and your spirit and then you're just sorry, but you're meat on the table for the big boys.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. And I like the way that you went with that, because I was talking to somebody earlier today about something exactly like that. And I said, you know what? I don't mean to sound condescending here, but they were explaining that they were tired of people not knowing anything. They were kind of, surrounded by stupidity, and they were sick of it. And this is a person that's very hopeful. And I said, I really wish people would snap out of it. And they said, well, people just want to switch off. They want to turn off. They don't want to deal with things. And I'm like, well, you watch baseball. I wasn't saying this to the person in general. I was just speaking, in terms of everybody else. I said, they watch baseball, they watch auto racing, they watch football or movies, Netflix, whatever, right? Whatever your thing is. I said, you got time to do that, but you don't have time to read a book about things and about issues and policies by these people that make decisions that affect your life. You don't have time to do that. And they say, well, I mean, I don't want to say they're making excuses for them, but I mean, it's almost what it seemed like. And again, I'm not knocking this person. They were just kind of pointing out the obvious to me, because I probably just wasn't seeing it at the time. And that was that people are busy living their lives, raising their kids, working a job or whatever, and dealing with family issues or whatever. And I'm sympathetic to that. But at the same time, if you have all of these things that you're dealing with, don't you want to be informed about what's going on and how you're supposed to be able to navigate this so you can protect your family? And so you can educate your children. I mean, that to me is the way I look at it. Maybe my mind's just wired differently. I don't know. But that to me would seem like the most obvious thing to do. If I'm in that position, obviously that's what I want to do. Again, maybe my mind's just wired differently. But I saw this video today of this American guy, and he's sitting there and he's talking about what the State Department and the DOD and everybody else are announcing to the public. I mean, who cares? It's just, talking points or whatever. Then he was talking about how great it was to see new tracks on Mario Kart. And I thought to myself, what is the point of even making a video about that? You're just showing your stupidity. I don't understand. The point that this person that showed me this was trying to make is that this is the average person that they're dealing with in the United States. These types of people that's the attitude.
Sorry, but you have to translate the Latin for me. What is a new thing on Mario Kart? I mean, I don't even know what that is.
All right. So Mario Kart, that's what President Joe Biden plays. It's a video game where you drive around. And,
okay.
Mario Brothers. It's a little go-kart game. Yeah. For kids.
Yeah. All right.
And they have tracks.
Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yes, and they have tracks that you drive these little go-karts around on, and virtually on the Nintendo systems.
All right.
And they were talking about how excited they were about new tracks being released for Mario Kart as opposed to.
Okay. Yeah.
Like this is the point the person was trying to make to me was this is the average American mindset they're dealing with. It's not that specific person per se, but this is the average person that you run across. They don't care. They're just,
Yeah. Alan Watt used to always talk about how people would come to love socialism because experts are doing your thinkings. They're thinking for you. They're ironing out the big problems, the issues. And that is where we are. And it's scientific socialism, and it is scientifically perfected socialism. And we've been studied for donkey's years. And so they understand that, see, the young person who's got the fight in them, who would say, okay, that's not right. Well, what are they doing right now? They are either addicted to online pornography, or they are screaming at people for not being sustainable and green and all of that. So that's the young people out the way. And then for the people who are 20, 25 to 40, well, I used to say that they might be raising families and going through all of that saga of getting a house and everything, but not so much now. They're playing video games or whatever. And then you get old and you die. And see, this is studied. So there's got to be something in an individual that can reconnect the ability to think, to understand who is doing this to us, and reconnect with that fight. That fight, it's fight or flight. Well, guess what? Fight. Pick fight. And if you pick fight, things can come together for you. You can do your little, here we are with two podcasts, my tiny one. I don't know what your audience is, but we do what we do. And I talk about Alan Watt, just listen to Alan Watt, go, figure it out, try to piece this together for you. But people are making a choice. And so what your friend is describing, why are people so stupid, or they're going along, or they can't be bothered to read. And they've made a choice. They've made a series of choices. And what you can do is leave them to their choice, leave them to their choices, because that's what they want. Because the alternative is, if you know and you accept and you say, okay, I'm going to do something, that's your life as you knew it over. You never see the world the same way. You're engaged in things totally differently. And that's just not for everybody. A lot of people prefer their beer and their Mario game.
No, I understand what you just said there completely, because vacations are ruined for me. I can't do them anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's like everybody, like the whole COVID thing, and I'm like, I'm charged up through this whole COVID thing. I'm like, all right, finally, let's get this waiting out of the way and let's hit the bricks and let's go. Right, ideologically and in the mindset, let's get into it, because that's what the fight is. That is in. Ideologically, it's going to be, this is the fight for the future. This is it, because this will be our life. And it's like, all they want to do is watch Netflix and go on vacation. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind? Yeah. And I can't even, I could go on vacation. That's just it. I could go on vacation, but I wouldn't be able to enjoy it. So there's no point in my mind. It's like, I took a weekend not long ago. I took a weekend and I went to this I want to say it was like a resort or something, the whole spa and the sauna and the big heated swimming pools and all that stuff, right? All the nice dinners and breakfasts and all that, room service and all, the whole 9 yards, right? 5-star place or 3-star, whatever it was, 5-star place. 3 hours into it, I'm like, what am I even doing here? Like I'm sitting next to the pool, and I'm sitting in one of these big comfortable chairs, cushions all around me, and I'm getting ready to go check out the the sauna and see what it is, and I'm like, what am I even doing here? And I just wanted to leave. So it's like it's not like I'm sitting there, I'm reading. I think I took like 3 books on like geopolitics and stuff, and I'm like, I can't even sit here. I didn't even want to sit here. I felt sorry for the kid who was bringing me a glass of water. So I can't enjoy it anymore. I don't want to say I don't care, but I don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it does. It completely makes sense to me, Johnny, and I understand that. And what I learned to do, what I always advocate for people who have put on the They Live sunglasses, is that you also have the accompanying mask. And that mask allows you to move out socially when you have to, when you need to, when you're pulled away, and go, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, neat. Okay. Because I can see it from their point of view. I can actually sometimes, I'm not reading their mind, but I'm around people that care about me, and I can hear it in their little chatter of their mind. Oh, she just needs to relax. She needs a hobby. She needs, and I don't want them to have to feel that. So I just kind of keep everything to myself. It's like, sorry, I'm on fire for this. You don't have to be. I don't need you to be, but I couldn't possibly have a good time doing your little holiday thing.
Nope, just couldn't.
And at the same time, it's important to be able to decompress as well, to keep from going insane. So there is an element of, I agree with you guys, it's difficult to do that, but at the same time, we do need those moments of just kick back and relax a bit and decouple from what's going on, and take the moments to focus on family and friends and those kind of things. Yeah.
Well, you get moments.
I legitimately tried. I tried, and it lasted all of 3 hours, and I'm like, all right, I've had enough. I've had enough.
Well, I have my ways of decompressing. It's a cup of coffee and sitting outside, or, watching my cat play, or playing with my cat, or, baths are nice.
That's true, yeah.
I don't need it. That's the thing, is that I decompress very efficiently in my own way. And I just don't need the things that we're told that we have to have, a holiday once a year, or, the weekend. I guess I'm not wired that way.
No, I'm certainly not. And well, I mean, I guess maybe at one point I used to be, but then I can't anymore. You know, like the COVID thing, you know, the little statistics that I say at the beginning of every podcast, that's when it all changed for me. I mean, that's not when it changed per se, but that's when it kicked into high gear, and I'm just like, okay, I'm done with all the rest of that stuff. I don't have time for that anymore. And so that's when everything changed.
I mean, that being said, I absolutely can enjoy the moments that I get with a friend or a family member or the cat or whatever. But I simply know that because I am the way that I am, that part of my life has to be, you know, carefully managed. I can't overindulge in that because all I get is I feel bad because I would literally rather be working on something that shares reality as I understand it with other people than just hanging out, kicking back, relaxing.
I just lost my train of thought on that.
Ooh, get it back, Bruce, quick.
You see, he was taking a break. That's what he was doing. He's been taking too much of a break and letting his mind drift.
I did. I let my mind drift. I looked over and looked at the music that started up, and I was like, that's Latin. I don't know how to pronounce that. And then I totally lost my train of thought. Yeah, it's probably just we'll leave it at that. It'll come back later, and it'll be like, oh yeah, that's right, and I got to stop thinking about it.
Yeah. Okay, well, Melissa, it's been an absolutely wonderful conversation with you, and we're happy to have you back, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. So again,
great.
That is Melissa from cuttingthroughthematrix.com. I encourage all of our listeners to get over there and take a look at the fabulous work that they do in keeping the life collected works of the late, great Alan Watt up for your own self-education, which, again, I owe it a lot to the things that guy put together, and it's been absolutely fantastic having you on. We'll see you in 2 weeks. That will be all for today. I would like to thank you both for being here today. Thank you to all of the listeners. God bless everyone, and have a great evening.